For this very special tutorial series, I'm going to show you how exactly I created this carousel jar. I have done a lot of research how to make this item exactly how I wanted, but due to lack of information out there, 90% of this process, techniques and execution, I figured out. As this creation takes a bit longer time to complete, I'm only going to talk about how I made the top part. This way, I'm hoping the process won't be too overwhelming. So let's get to it. Here I want to demonstrate that I needed to make the top wider in circumference to match the body and the design. You can see here that a canopy shape is formed on the top with some rope details. Also on the bottom around the edges for extra details, but it also hides imperfections perfectly. I used one type of mold around the edges and some plastic gemstones too. Now let's talk about the top and priming. The jar itself has to be quite large, and this has a type of top with a security pop feature. The previous one didn't have this, but it won't make any difference in the design. As with all non-porous surfaces, before applying the clay, this had to be primed too. I did it with black matte spray. And here are all the items that will be featured in this video, with an exception of a shaping tool which can help in the process, but it's not necessary. Just to quickly show you for which part I'll use which molds. The middle of this has a little plastic gemstone, which I'm going to talk about later. This is the one used on the top, but shaped a little bit downwards. And this mold I'm actually using for the rope details, which is rounded on the top and also a bigger one on the bottom. So let's start the work by rolling some clay out. I need about 1 centimeter thickness extra around the lid. Now I'm marking the clay with the lid, so I just cut the width that I need. Here I'm just going to make sure very quickly that I have the thickness I'm going to need. To make sure that the clay and the wood glue will stick to the lid well, I just score or scrape the surface of the clay. I push the clay gently but firmly in the way that it won't disfigure the shape of the clay. Also at the attachments, I do the best I can to blend the clay parts well. Now I basically do the same to create a thicker foundation for the top of the lid. This little imperfection in a circle won't matter in the end, as I'm just going to put a small piece in later. This part will need a thicker layer of glue to secure this thick piece of clay. When all done and before drying, I just make sure that all glued well and all possible air bubbles got rid of. Also, just a quick note that the whole top piece was individually dried in my air fryer. It's perfectly safe to use on a thaw or a lowest setting before the canopy shape gets onto it. It needed to dry almost completely. So as you can see, I just shaped this bit with my fingers from a piece of clay, and as you can see, this top piece is already dried about 90%. So when you're done with your canopy piece, what I'm going to do, I just make sure that the clay piece is centered. I am holding the top between my fingers when I actually score the surface. Now I blend it around with my fingers and water, and sometimes I use my palette knife. This piece is going to be dried separately again. Now I went to work into the night, but because I'm not going to record any process with color, I decided to keep recording. This rope base is going to be the next step. This has to go on first before all the pieces around the edges, because it makes it easier in the process with the design I want. After this step, I had to put it in the air fryer one more time to avoid any deformation while I work with the top later on. Also, this rope piece will hide all the imperfection of the clay I put on previously. While drying the top, I prepare all the clay pieces. As the last piece goes in, there's a little less space left for it, but I'm just making some room for it by cutting and shaping the others around it. To make my work a little bit easier, I have to dry all again after this step. And while everything is drying, I prepare the ropes for the canopies. Just so you know, I miscalculated a bit of how many pieces I will need in the end, as I only used half of it. So these details, when dry, are very fragile, so I wanted to strengthen the structure. I glued the area where I needed some clay, and I shaped it with a drop of water and my fingers and adjusted to look like the edge of the canopy. I use a drop of water to help to smooth the surface out. I made sure that it's smooth all over and completely blends in. And now we can add the ropes. And now the top part. I bend the clay a little bit so in the process it won't break too much. Here I'm just putting tiny details, and after that I just leave everything to dry for the night. This is the next day now. Everything is fully dried and the only thing left to do is to add the little plastic gemstones as a final touch. Comparing it to the previous piece, I think it looks even better. When I made this first one, I didn't use water and it makes all the difference. I'm just quickly going to get rid of these cracks with a little bit of wood glue and tiny pieces of clay. So I use these gemstones because they can add extra detail which makes the overall design even better. Depends on the shapes. I use these sheet ones because they are really cheap and easy to store. You can get it in any hobbycraft store. I use super glue to glue it on, but I won't show you the whole process because it's pretty straightforward. Now the top is done and I will post the rest of the tutorials very soon. I hope you liked it. Thank you, bye!